profite des 30 secondes qui nous restent pour vous dire qu'il y a une super tanka de Chenrezig qui a été installée dans la bibliothèque en bas, encastrée dans le mur. C'est très très beau et ça vaut le détour. Si vous prenez la route, ça sera une super bénédiction pour votre route.
On va pouvoir commencer.
We'll begin.
Tukalik pamtien gandak sipet senarar marik mentum dunger kisir shwe chotsoy kin la botik tatse yan lak tukye yan ten suin trukta chetrok Yelong le ki chadro zhe qing marik mense dong nyoko chenye chetze rajinam dene dachin sachi tasen yenten le tso kiese to weko chotrak chotan choni Talu minse chambe yang la tu teden keki kenarab öser ki talu timok min parab sene katong tenche shungluik tokpa ye lotre pope nan watsa tu so.
Yesterday, we forgot to answer the question that was asked a couple days ago. We'll take the time to answer it now. I believe the question was, what's the difference between a non-virtuous mind and an afflicted mind? To begin with, what we can remember is that the mental events that are around a non-virtuous sovereign mind were clarified to include... Khelzang Puntso clarified that all of the afflictions of the desire realm are not non-virtuous. There are 3 afflictive obscurations that are not non-virtuous but are undefined: the view of a whole in destruction, a view that grasps extremes, and ignorance mixed with these 2 views. So these 3 afflictive obscurations are the only undefined afflictive obscurations in the desire realm. All of the other ones are non-virtuous. We could also add that in the higher realms, As we saw, there is no non-virtue. Nevertheless, there are still afflictive obscurations. Then we went into more detail and counted up but we can look at the mental events that are present around an undefined sovereign mind that hinders liberation. There are 18 mental events. The 10 of the first great basis that are present around all sovereign minds. The 2 present in the desire realm, course examination and subtle analysis. And then Khelzang Puntso said, in comparison with non-virtuous sovereign mind, which was explained just before, he said we won't count the group of mental events that accompany all non-virtuous sovereign minds, because here sovereign mind is undefined. So in that case, absence of esteem and absence of consideration are not present, these 2 that make up the basis for non-virtuous sovereign mind. However, due to the fact that this undefined sovereign mind hindering liberation is by definition associated with one of the undefined afflictive obscurations, which we named just now, one of the first 2 views, or ignorance mixed with these 2 views. Due to this, it is sovereign mind that is afflicted, and therefore the group of 6 mental events that accompany all afflicted sovereign mind will be present. This group of 6 is present here in the context of an undefined sovereign mind hindering liberation, and in this case these afflictions are also undefined hindering liberation. We find the group of 6 in a non-virtuous sovereign mind as well, and in that case these 6 mental events and all that is around a non-virtuous sovereign mind is non-virtuous. We can repeat which these 6 are. These 6 are ignorance, absence of attentive care, laziness, lack of confidence, torpor, and agitation. Does that sufficiently answer your question? It's okay? Well, in any case, there's more time for questions at the end if necessary. Closing the door. So just to outline where we are, in the detailed explanation of non-associated conditioning phenomena, we looked at the concise presentation where we listed them. Now we're looking at the detailed explanation. The first subpoint is obtaining and non-obtaining. We saw that there are 3 subsections to this: identification of the nature of nature, what is obtained, and the particularities. We concluded the first 2 subsections, and now we come to the section on particularities. There are 2 subsections to this point on particularities. There is the particularity of obtaining, particularities of obtaining and particularities of non-obtaining. Now we'll look at the particularities of obtaining to begin. The detailed explanation includes 6 parts. We will look at particularities in terms of time, in terms of nature, in terms of realm, in terms of learning and beyond learning, in terms of what is to be abandoned and what is not, and the particular case of temporal particularity. The first particularity is in terms of time. This part concerns the particularities of moment of obtaining. We find this in stanza 37, line 2. The root text says, obtaining of phenomena in the 3 times is in 3 moments. Obtaining of phenomena in the 3 times is in 3 moments. This obtaining that is in 3 moments does not apply to all things that are obtained. It is in the case of certain types of obtaining. We'll look at this more later. There are certain things obtained in the past, in the present, and in the future. In certain cases, which we will clarify later, when something of the past is obtained, there can be 3 moments of obtaining. For something present obtained, there can also be 3 moments of obtaining. And for something obtained in the future, there can be 3 moments of obtaining. Let's consider the case of something obtained in the past, for which there are 3 moments of obtaining. Khelzang Puntso gave us an example. He said, for example, yesterday, although I saw the suffering of beings, when I saw the suffering of beings, a great feeling of compassion appeared. So just before this moment of compassion arose, there is what's called pre-obtaining. Then, at the moment when compassion arises, there is obtaining that is also present. And after compassion has appeared, there is post-obtaining. This post-obtaining continues to be present. In this example, there are indeed 3 moments of obtaining. In order to illustrate these 3 moments of obtaining, Khelzang Puntso offers another example. He says, it's like a king or someone very important who is going to arrive at Dhagpo Kagyu at precisely 10 a.m. He says, an hour beforehand, his servants and guards will prepare everything. Then, at 10, the king arrives with his entourage, with all of these people. He gives a speech, and at 11, he leaves again. And then, after this, some of his guards and servants will remain after. This is a way of illustrating the three moments of obtaining. Something happened before the king arrived, there's something happening while he's present, and there's something that occurs after he's no longer there. If we come back to the example of great compassion, just before the moment when compassion arises, there is pre-obtaining. At the moment when compassion arises, then there is a moment of obtaining. And just after compassion arises, there will be post-obtaining of great compassion. When we talk about this post-obtaining, the obtaining of the obtaining of the pre-obtaining of compassion will have ceased, but obtaining itself will continue. For some phenomena of the past, there will be 3 moments of obtaining. For some phenomena of the present, likewise, there will be 3 moments of obtaining. And for certain future phenomena, there will be 3 moments of obtaining. That is summarized presentation. Khelzang Puntso concludes the point by saying that this idea of the 3 moments of obtaining is very important. He says that this idea allows us to understand what follows, notably in chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7. He also clarifies that if we truly apprehend this idea, then if we don't truly apprehend this idea, then the concepts in the following chapters will be difficult to understand. So that was the first point in terms of time. Now we come to the second particularity in terms of nature. This is what's said in the root text, stanza 37, line 3, where it says, obtaining virtuous phenomena, etc., is virtuous, etc. The explanation is relatively short. This means that if what is obtained is virtuous, then obtaining itself is virtuous. In the same way, if what is obtained is non-virtuous, obtaining is non-virtuous. And lastly, if the object that is obtained is neither virtuous nor non-virtuous, in other words, if it is undefined, then obtaining itself is also undefined, in other words, neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. This concludes the second subpoint on nature. Now we come to the third particularity of obtaining in terms of realm. Here we'll ask ourselves, whether obtaining is in the desire realm, the form realm, or the formless realm, and in what case is it not part of the three realms. Here, Khelzang Puntso told us that the subject can seem difficult, but it's not really that difficult. The root text, stanza 37, line 4, and stanza 38, line 1. Obtaining things belonging to the three realms is of the corresponding realm. Obtaining what is not part of the three realms is of four kinds. So we will look at this and its meaning now. We'll begin with the first line. Once again, if obtaining things belonging to the three realms is of the corresponding realm. If the thing that is to be obtained is part of the three realms, obtaining will also be from one of the three realms. It's just as simple as what was explained previously. If the thing obtained is from the desire realm, of the desire realm, then obtaining is also of the desire realm. If the thing obtained is from the form realm, then obtention itself is also from the form realm. And if the thing obtained is from the formless realm, then obtaining itself is of the formless realm. When the thing that is obtained is part of one of the three realms, then the obtaining at hand is also part of that same realm. That is the general case when the things obtained are from the three realms. However, there is another case which matches the second line we read. Obtaining what is not part of the three realms is of four kinds. And we'll look at what this means. Here, in this case, we're looking at a phenomenon that is the thing obtained, and this thing is not among the three realms of existence. This thing that is obtained is dissociated from factors for descent. It is not part of the three realms. There are three phenomena concerned in relation to this obtaining. First, cessation by way of examination, then cessation without the means of examination, and last, the truth of the path. So now we'll look at these three phenomena in terms of things that are obtained. That there is obtaining for each of these things. There is obtaining relative to each of these three phenomena. We'll see where this obtaining is located, or we could say how obtaining is for each of these three phenomena. Then we'll go over 4 cases. We'll begin with obtaining cessation without the means of examination. Obtaining cessation without the means of examination is associated with factors for descent. In other words, said to be contaminated. Thus, it is part of the 3 realms of existence. That's all that's stated here concerning obtaining of cessation without the means of examination. Now we'll look at obtaining the truth of the path. This obtaining of the truth of the path is dissociated from factors for descent. Therefore, it does not belong to or is not a part of the 3 realms. That's all that's said concerning obtaining the truth of the path. Now, where it gets a bit more complex is obtaining cessation by way of examination, the 3rd phenomenon. Obtaining includes 2 cases here. Obtaining of cessation by way of examination can occur through a worldly path or a superworldly path. All of this will be explained along with examples. In any case, we'll go more into these 2 cases. Obtaining cessation by way of examination through a worldly path or through a superworldly path. And please keep in mind that it is separation, disjunction with phenomena that are associated with factors for descent, in this case, the afflictive obscurations. Thus, there is something that creates this separation. And what is it? It is a path. Two paths can bring about disjunction with afflictive obscurations and phenomena associated with factors for descent. Either a worldly path or a superworldly path. By way of either of these paths, we can attain cessation by way of examination, which is disjunction from, separation from the afflictive obscurations. If, on the basis of a worldly path, we attain cessation by way of examination, then this obtaining is said to be associated with factors for descent. In the case of a worldly path, this means that this obtaining is associated with factors for descent. If, based on a super-worldly path, there is obtaining of cessation by way of examination, then this obtaining is dissociated from factors for descent. And next we'll look at examples. So we'll begin with an example concerning obtaining cessation by way of examination via a worldly path. Khelzang Puntso told us to imagine a practitioner who, through meditation, develops meditative absorption of the first meditative absorption of the form realm. Due to having actualized this meditative absorption, this means that they have disconnected from everything that is to be abandoned in relation to the desire realm. If they've actualized the meditation of the first level of the form realm, then they have abandoned everything that is to be abandoned in relation to the desire realm. This disjunction occurred based on a worldly path. There has been cessation by way of examination. Obtaining this obtaining is associated with factors for descent. Due to having occurred through a worldly path. Next, we're looking at obtaining cessation through the means of examination by a super-worldly path. This is the case of a practitioner who obtains the path of seeing, and thus who abandons all that is to be abandoned by the path of seeing. Therefore, there is a disjunction or disconnection from with what is abandoned what is to be abandoned by the path of seeing. There is cessation of these things which are to be abandoned. Here, the path is a superworldly one. On this basis, we obtain cessation through the means of examination, and this on a superworldly path. Thus, this obtaining is said to be dissociated from factors for descent. So now we've looked at 4 cases of obtaining concerning phenomena dissociated from factors for descent. It's important here to distinguish between the objects, the things that are obtained, and the obtaining of these things that are obtained. The 4 cases concern phenomena that are themselves dissociated from factors for descent, but this does not mean that obtaining itself is dissociated from factors for descent. We'll give a summary here of the obtaining. In the first case, all obtaining of cessation without the means of examination are associated with factors for descent, are contaminated. Next, we looked at obtaining of the truth of the path. We saw that this is solely uncontaminated, dissociated from factors for descent. And then, concerning obtaining cessation by way of examination, we distinguish 2 cases, the 3rd and 4th cases here. The 3rd case is how, based on a worldly path, it can be associated with factors for descent. And then the 4th case, how, on the basis of a superworldly path, this obtaining can be dissociated from factors for descent. So that concerns the 3rd particularity of obtaining in terms of realm. Now we'll take a short silent break. Now we come to the fourth particularity of obtaining, a particularity in terms of learning and no more learning or beyond learning. In this point, we'll look at the particularities of obtaining, what is in the course of learning, beyond learning, and what is neither in the process of learning nor beyond learning. We find this in the root text in stanza 38, line 2. Obtaining what is neither in progress of learning nor beyond learning is of three types. To start, what is meant by in the process of learning, in progress of learning? This refers to the path of seeing and the path of meditation or familiarization. So in progress of learning includes these two paths. No more learning or beyond learning refers to the path of no more learning. When the thing to be obtained is related to what is in progress of learning, what is still learning, in other words, the path of seeing and the path of meditation, obtaining of this thing is also in relation with the path of seeing and the path of meditation. Then, when the thing to be obtained is in relation to what is no more learning, obtaining of this thing is also in relation with what is no more learning or beyond learning. Then there are three things that can, in certain cases, be neither in progress of learning nor no more learning, beyond learning. The first is contaminated phenomena, or those that are associated with factors for descent. The second is cessation without the means of examination. First, phenomena that are associated with factors for descent, and second, cessation without the means of examination, and third, cessation by way of examination. These things can be, in certain cases, neither still learning nor beyond learning. If we look at the obtaining of these three things, the obtaining of what is neither still learning nor beyond learning, obtaining itself is of three types. Concerning obtaining a phenomenon associated with factors for descent and obtaining cessation without the means of examination. These two types of obtaining are, for certain, neither related to what is still learning nor related to what is beyond learning. obtaining cessation without the means of examination is the second one. The third phenomenon is obtaining cessation by way of examination. This obtaining can occur based on a worldly path or a superworldly path. Here, when this cessation is obtained by a worldly path, obtaining this cessation is neither related to what is still learning, nor related to what is beyond learning. However, when this cessation by way of examination is obtained through a superworldly path, then obtaining of this cessation can be either associated with the path that's still learning or associated with the path beyond learning, of no more learning. With more detail, if it is with a superworldly path, if we obtain cessation, let's start this sentence from the beginning. If with this superworldly path we obtain the paths that are still learning, then obtaining of this cessation will be associated with the path that is still learning. But if with this path, a superworldly path, we obtain the path beyond learning, then obtaining of this cessation will be associated with the path beyond learning. Khelzang Puntso concludes this point by saying we just looked at a lot of combinations in terms of things obtained and obtaining itself. We saw combinations concerning phenomena associated with factors for descent, cessation without the means of examination, and cessation by way of examination. If you're lost, it's normal. We can't understand on the first shot. This is the information. It took us a certain amount of time to untangle the meaning. We're not sure to have fully understood. Even if it's going too fast to take notes, all of the content is available on YouTube for everyone. And the reason for that is so that you all have access to this over the course of time. Additionally, there is a group of course participants who create transcripts, so you can get in contact with that group for that. it's normal not to be able to take notes on everything, even if we were going twice as slow, it would be difficult. And is that the purpose, really? We'll continue a little bit more here. Now we come to the fifth particularity of obtaining, which is in terms of what is to be abandoned and what is not. Here, the root text says in stanza 38, it is held that obtaining what is not to be abandoned is of two types. It is held that obtaining what is not to be abandoned is of two types. Khelzang Puntso here says that this fifth particularity concerns obtaining what is to be abandoned and what is not to be abandoned. We'll ask ourselves the following question. If the thing obtained is to be abandoned, what is obtaining? Pardon me. What is obtaining like? If the thing obtained is not to be abandoned, what is obtaining like? Let's begin with obtaining something that is to be abandoned. In other words, all phenomena associated with factors for descent. Obtaining of all phenomena associated with factors for descent is itself associated with factors for descent. In other words, obtaining of what is to be abandoned is likewise to be abandoned. All phenomena associated with factors for descent are to be abandoned. Obtaining something to be abandoned is also to be abandoned. If the thing obtained is to be abandoned, obtaining itself is to be abandoned. In the case where the thing obtained is to be abandoned, obtaining itself is also to be abandoned. Next, we'll look at phenomena dissociated from factors for descent. We'll consider the same phenomena here, cessation without the means of examination, and cessation by way of examination with two subdivisions, and the truth of the path. And for these three phenomena dissociated from factors for descent, we'll look at what obtaining is like. obtaining cessation without the means of examination. This obtaining is to be abandoned. It's important, again, to distinguish between the thing obtained and obtaining itself. We can see that in the second case here, the things obtained are dissociated from factors for descent. Cessation by means of examination is not to be abandoned. Yeah, let's scratch that. In any case, it's not to be abandoned. But obtaining of cessation without the means of examination is to be abandoned. If the thing obtained is cessation without the means of examination, then obtaining is for certain to be abandoned. Then we have the second case, obtaining of cessation by way of examination. It's twofold. There is obtaining cessation by way of examination based on a worldly path, and obtaining cessation by way of examination based on a superworldly path. If there is obtaining of cessation, this cessation based on a worldly path, then the obtaining of this cessation is to be abandoned. If there is obtaining of cessation by way of examination based on a superworldly path, then obtaining of this cessation is not to be abandoned. Those were the two sub-cases concerning cessation by way of examination, which is the second case out of 3 here. The third case is obtaining the truth of the path. Obtaining the truth of the path is not to be abandoned. This might seem kind of dry, but this is the first 2 chapters. They give a lot of general information, which then are explored in the following 6 chapters in more detail. It's like musical theory, but once we learn it, we'll be able to make music. It'll be more fun. We've come to the 6th point. Maybe we'll take a short break first. Concerning the 6 particularities of obtaining, we've looked at the first 5. Now we come to the 6th one. This concerns the particular cases of temporal particularity. The temporal particularity or particularity of time was the first point. There are 3 parts here. The particular case of obtaining a phenomenon that is undefined, not hindering liberation. Then we'll look at the particular case of obtaining a phenomenon that is undefined, hindering liberation. And third, the particular case of obtaining virtue and non-virtue, as you can see in the outline. We'll start with the first point. In stanza 37, line 2, we saw that obtaining phenomena of the 3 times is in 3 moments. Here we'll see that this doesn't apply to all phenomena. We'll begin with the first particular case, that of obtaining a phenomenon that is undefined, not hindering liberation. The root text says in stanza 38, line 4, obtaining of what is undefined is, what is not defined, is simultaneous. That is the first particular case of temporal particularity. Concerning a phenomenon that is undefined, not hindering liberation, we'll consider the 5 sense faculties. As we saw in chapter 1, the 5 faculties are undefined. Here they represent the thing that is obtained. Between these things that are obtained and the one who obtains, there is no pre-obtaining nor post-obtaining. There is neither obtaining before nor after. Obtaining what is undefined is simultaneous with the undefined thing itself. In this case, one of the 5 sense faculties. Obtaining of what is not defined is simultaneous with the undefined thing itself. There is no obtaining before and no obtaining after. For example, I faculty is undefined, not hindering liberation. Obtaining this faculty does not have 3 moments of obtaining. There is neither a moment before nor a moment after. I faculty and obtaining of it are simultaneous. Nevertheless, we'll see there are a few exceptions. However, don't believe that everything that is undefined, not hindering liberation, is simultaneous with its obtaining. Here the text cites 2 examples in stanza 39, line 1. except for the two extrasensory knowledges and mind of emanation. These two extrasensory types of knowledge, which are divine eye and divine ear, as well as mind of emanation, these three things are likewise undefined, not hindering liberation. We'll discover mind of emanation in chapter 3. Nevertheless, obtaining these three things, which are undefined, not hindering liberation, occurs in 3 moments. Obtaining before, obtaining during, and obtaining after. Divine ear or divine eye are not easily obtained. This occurs based on long, hard effort obtaining these two extrasensory faculties. When we started with the particularities in terms of time, it was said in certain cases this occurs in 3 moments. And so here they are obtained due to long, hard effort, due to a lot of diligence. And thus there are 3 moments of obtaining. When something is obtained due to great effort, it is said to be like propulsion. There are 3 moments of obtaining. However, when something is obtained with little effort, there are not these 3 moments of obtaining. If we recap, what is meant by undefined here is what is neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. There are 2 types of undefined. Undefined hindering liberation and undefined not hindering liberation. The main question here is everything that is undefined, not hindering liberation, possessing 3 moments of obtaining? Does everything that is undefined, not hindering liberation, possess 3 moments of obtaining? The answer is no. There are things that are obtained in 3 moments of obtaining and others not. We looked at the example of the 5 sense faculties, which are undefined, not hindering liberation. Obtaining these 5 faculties does not occur in 3 moments. Obtaining and the thing obtained are simultaneous. However, there can be obtaining of a phenomenon that is undefined, not hindering liberation, that occurs in 3 moments. There were 3 examples given: divine eye, divine ear, and mind of emanation. For these 3, when we obtain them, there are 3 moments of obtaining. This was the first point concerning obtaining an undefined phenomenon. We saw that undefined phenomena are of two types: undefined phenomena not hindering liberation and undefined phenomena hindering liberation. Here we looked at obtaining undefined phenomena not hindering liberation. We saw that some have 3 moments of obtaining and others do not. We have just barely a quarter of an hour left. We can take time for questions if you have questions, otherwise we can continue. No questions, huh? Concerning the classification, is obtaining concerning obtaining what is to be abandoned and what is not. If I understood correctly, it was said that for what is not to be abandoned, concerning cessation by way of examination, if it is obtained by a worldly path, then the obtaining of this cessation is to be abandoned. But the cessation itself is not to be abandoned. Is that correct? Yes. That's what we covered. We looked at 2 cases, a phenomenon to be abandoned and a phenomenon not to be abandoned. In the first case, we saw that the phenomena to be abandoned includes all phenomena associated with factors for descent. And in the second case, we saw that neither cessation by way of examination nor cessation without examination nor the truth of the path, is that the right one, are to be abandoned. Not the path of seeing. Ooh, I don't remember the third one. Sorry, guys. Yeah, the truth of the path. Concerning the very beginning of this session, when we were talking about the example that Khelzang Puntso gave, concerning the particularities of obtaining in relation to time. We saw in the example these 3 times: pre-obtaining, obtaining, post-obtaining, and here it is said that this post-obtaining continues to be there. Can you clarify what this means? It's important to know that this point is the point that took us most of our study time. We spent almost all of our time trying to understand the meaning of this point, and we're not sure if we've reached a consensus about what it means within our group. Thus, I don't really want to define what it is here, because there will be other information given when we get to non-obtaining. There are important points that come in order to understand what's at hand here. Okay, similar question, but concerning pre-obtaining. What's the question then? It's the same type of question for post-obtaining, but for pre-obtaining. But then what's the question? What is pre-obtaining? In a certain sense, we can't go further than what's said. In any case, it is a moment that occurs before the phenomenon is present. In the case of great compassion, before it arises, there is a moment of pre-obtaining, as was illustrated with the example of a king, someone important arriving. Before they arrive, there's already something. There's people setting up. I don't remember exactly how it's said, but the guards and the servants who arrive, even though they're not there yet. And that's in the case of obtaining, that occurs in 3 moments, and that are obtained based on effort and diligence. This is not the case for all phenomena. Coming back to yesterday, there was an expression that was very perplexing concerning attachment and self-absorption, which is attachment to one's own qualities, and then pride. It had such a state of mind is completely inclined or slanted. Does it mean that it is completely attached? Because self-absorption is attachment to one's own qualities? Someone asked that question yesterday, Antoine. We didn't have much more inclination in terms of joyful contentment concerning one's own qualities. We're not objective. We appreciate our own qualities. We're happy with ourselves, pleased with ourselves in this sense. That's how I understand it. Concerning the example related to compassion, at a certain point, Martin, you corrected, actually it's great compassion. Is this valid for the moment of obtaining or for post-obtaining? What has arisen is great compassion. That's the phenomenon. And obtaining occurs in 3 moments. It's important to distinguish. We're talking about 3 types of phenomena. Phenomena of the past, phenomena of the present, and phenomena of the future. And for each of these 3 types of phenomena, there are 3 moments of obtaining in certain cases. My question concerns cessation by way of examination, which can be obtained based on a path, given that it's an ultimate phenomenon. How can it be obtained by a worldly path, and obtaining remains contaminated? Because cessation by way of examination seems to be what we need to obtain. There are 2 paths, but they don't lead to the same result. In relation to what I understand, and as it was explained, do you remember obtaining the 4 fruits of noble beings? There were different nuances of things to be abandoned that were explained in relation to the 3 realms. And we already mentioned worldly and superworldly paths. We can abandon nuances of things to be abandoned for some of them based on a worldly path, but this abandonment is temporary. In this way, we talk about cessation by way of examination, yes, but it's not the cessation by way of examination that we attain based on a super worldly path, based on reflecting on the 4 truths. So it doesn't lead to liberation. Yeah, exactly. That's the point. We explained that the path of meditation, even once we are a noble being, we can accomplish the path of meditation in a worldly way. In other words, by looking at the flaws, focusing on the flaws of our own level and the qualities of the level above. We can even do this prior to having attained the path of seeing. In the case of bounding fruit, we can eliminate up through the 6th. In fact, when we reach the higher realms, this is what happens. We actualize meditative absorptions. We obtain various cessations by way of examination, but in a worldly way. There is no liberation, and we can descend because there is no fruit of noble being there. We've reached the end of our time today. Thank you everyone for your perseverance. We'll see you soon in April.
Merci et bonne route.